"I'm sorry, sir, but I need to see additional identification. This passport, it seems irregular." IBRAHIM TRAORÉ stood perfectly still as fellow passengers turned to stare. The 37-year-old president of Burkina Faso had experienced combat against jihadist insurgents, survived 2 coups, and now led a nation of 21 million people. Yet here he stood, being denied boarding on an international flight while other passengers, many European diplomats among them, walked past with cursory document checks. His security detail tensed, hands hovering near concealed weapons. With a subtle gesture, Traore calmed them. He knew precisely what was happening, and more importantly, he knew exactly what he would do about it. "Your diplomatic credentials appear insufficient," the gate agent continued, voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding about your position." The airline representative had already permitted 3 other African officials from the same diplomatic delegation through the gate. All were lighter-skinned. All had received deferential treatment. A senior European diplomat who had been walking ahead stopped, turned back with feigned sympathy. "Perhaps I can help clarify things," he offered, speaking over Traore as if the Burkinabe leader were a junior aide rather than a head of state. The humiliation was deliberate, orchestrated. Intelligence reports had warned Traore that certain Western interests were uncomfortable with his recent policy shifts, nationalizing gold mines, establishing relations with Russia, founding the alliance of Sahel states with Mali and Niger. This was their response, a public diminishment designed to undermine his authority. "I assure you, my credentials are in order," Traore said quietly, voice steady. "Just as they were when I attended the United Nations General Assembly last month." The agent's expression hardened. "I'll need to speak with my supervisor." As the agent stepped away, Traore stood perfectly still, his military training evident in his posture. A nearby journalist, sensing a story, began recording discreetly on her phone. What the gate agent couldn't see, what most people couldn't recognize, was that IBRAHIM TRAORÉ possessed a quality rare in world leaders: authentic strategic patience. The young captain who had fought jihadists in northern Burkina Faso had learned to wait for the precise moment to act. "Sir, perhaps you should step aside while this is sorted," another airline representative suggested, gesturing toward a holding area away from the other passengers. Traore's aide leaned in, whispering urgently, "Mr. President, we should contact the embassy immediately. This is an international incident." "No," Traore replied calmly. "That's exactly what they want, a reaction, an outburst they can use to justify their discrimination." He smiled slightly. "I've waited in ambush positions for days tracking militants. I can wait here." What no one in the terminal realized was that Traore had anticipated this scenario. His communications director was already implementing a carefully prepared protocol, and a journalist from a major international outlet was seated nearby, witnessing everything. Within 20 minutes, the first alert appeared on diplomatic channels. Within 30, the hashtag #RespectTraore began trending regionally. The airline's corporate headquarters received simultaneous calls from 3 different embassies. The gate agent returned, flanked by a supervisor and security personnel. "Mr. Traore, I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to come with us for additional screening." What had begun as a personal humiliation was transforming into a diplomatic crisis. In Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, a crowd began gathering outside the airline's office. In neighboring Mali and Niger, government officials issued statements of solidarity. The supervisor leaned closer to Traore. "Sir, you're causing a disruption. If you don't comply, we'll be forced to deny you boarding altogether." Traore understood exactly what was unfolding. This wasn't merely about him. It represented the systemic disrespect shown to African leaders who challenged Western economic interests. If he backed down now, he would be reinforcing a narrative that African sovereignty could be casually dismissed. "I will not be moving from this spot," he said, voice still measured but carrying throughout the gate area. "I am a head of state traveling with valid diplomatic credentials." Either I board with the rest of my delegation, or I don't board at all. The supervisor's face flushed with anger. Then you won't be boarding. That evening, while the airline scrambled to contain the PR disaster, IBRAHIM TRAORÉ sat in his hotel suite, reviewing the implementation of his response plan. His foreign minister had already lodged formal complaints with both the airline's home country and the International Aviation Authority. The video, captured by the journalist, had gone viral with over 2 million views in just hours. Leaders from across Africa and the global south had issued statements of support. "What's our next move, Mr. President?" asked his chief strategist. Traore studied the economic briefing before him. The airline derived 22% of its revenue from African routes. Burkina Faso controlled significant mining interests that several Western corporations desperately needed access to. "We don't overreact," Traore said. "We respond with precision." Over the next 3 days, while declining all interview requests, Traore executed a multi-layered strategy. First, he authorized the release of documents showing the systematic mistreatment of African diplomats and officials by certain Western entities. Next, he convened an emergency virtual summit of the Alliance of Sahel States, resulting in a joint economic action plan targeting companies with discriminatory practices. Most significantly, he used his scheduled address at an international economic forum not to condemn or complain, but to propose a new framework for diplomatic protocol standards that would protect the dignity of all nations, regardless of economic power. "The true measure of respect in international relations," he told one advisor, "isn't shown in public statements, but in everyday interactions. That's where the real work begins." 1 week later, IBRAHIM TRAORÉ stood at a podium in the Grand Conference Hall of an international summit. Seated in the front row was the CEO of the airline, along with diplomats from 12 nations. The airline had issued a tepid apology, blaming the incident on security protocols and a misunderstanding. They had expected the matter to fade from headlines. Instead, Traore had methodically built a coalition that now included 27 nations demanding accountability. The economic implications were becoming impossible to ignore, with threatened boycotts and regulatory reviews. "Distinguished colleagues," Traore began, his voice calm but resonating throughout the hall. "Today I stand before you not just as the president of Burkina Faso, but as a representative of every person who has been judged not by their credentials or character, but by the color of their skin and the assumptions attached to it." The CEO shifted uncomfortably as Traore continued. "Last week's incident was not isolated. It was part of a pattern that many in this room have experienced but few have been positioned to challenge. Today, that changes." With precision and without emotion, Traore presented evidence of discriminatory treatment spanning years, disproportionate security checks, credential challenges, and boarding denials affecting officials from countries across Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia. "We are not asking for preferential treatment," he concluded. "We are demanding equal treatment. And we have prepared a comprehensive accountability framework that we invite this body to adopt." The framework included transparent reporting requirements, financial penalties for systematic discrimination, and an independent review board. As Traore laid out each element, the airline CEO's expression shifted from dismissal to concern, then to grudging respect. When Traore finished speaking, the hall erupted in applause, led by leaders from countries that had experienced similar treatment for decades. 3 months later, IBRAHIM TRAORÉ boarded a flight on the same airline. The difference was immediately apparent. The gate agent stood at attention, verifying his credentials with professional courtesy. The airline's new head of international relations personally ensured his comfortable passage. More significantly, the International Air Transport Association had adopted a modified version of Traoré's accountability framework, now being implemented across major airlines and airports globally. 4 major carriers had established executive-level diversity officers with actual authority. Training programs were being overhauled. But the most profound change came in diplomatic circles. What had begun as a humiliating moment for one leader had catalyzed a long-overdue conversation about respect in international relations. Nations that had previously accepted subtle indignities as the cost of engagement were finding their voice. In Ouagadougou, Traoré's approval rating had soared. His handling of the incident, calm, strategic, and ultimately effective, resonated with a population that had grown weary of leaders who either capitulated to Western interests or responded with ineffective bluster. As he settled into his first-class seat, a flight attendant approached. "Mr. President," she said, "the captain asked me to deliver this personally." She handed him an envelope containing a handwritten note from the airline CEO. "Your restraint taught me more than your righteous anger ever could. Your framework is changing our company and our industry for the better. Thank you for your leadership." Traoré folded the note carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. The victory wasn't in the apology, or even in the systemic changes, though both mattered greatly. The true vindication lay in demonstrating that dignity, patience, and strategic thinking could accomplish what outrage alone never could. A young Burkinabe diplomat seated across the aisle caught his eye and nodded respectfully. In that moment, Traoré knew he had provided a template that would outlast any policy framework, a model for confronting injustice with the quiet, inexorable power of dignified resistance.